Please. Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Bronwyn-Petrie, thank you. All in favour? Again, carried. Councillors, in your hard copy, we've moved to page 26. It's item COM/19. It's to do with the Ausstate Tamworth 31st to 3rd of November to the conference out there, and the recommendation is the attendance of our Councillor Very. Councillor Very, being on the board there, would you like to move that? Or would you like someone else to do it? Or?
I'd like to move it. I'd like to put an amendment there as well.
We'll deal with that in a minute. So the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Very. Seconder, please. Councillor Rogan, thank you. Councillor Very.
I'm not too sure if I can go while this drought's still on.
Right.
Because it's a couple of days out of my schedule.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'd just like to move an amendment that we have an alternate councillor go.
Yep. Would you like to nominate someone, or would you?
I'd like to nominate Bob Rogan because there's a lot with these art committees. I'm just a bit puffed.
No, you're right.
It has a lot to do with tourism.
Yep. Fair point. Councillor Rogan, you accept that if Councillor Very cannot attend?
If he's not available, yeah, sure, Mr. Mayor, I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Very will work with that as an amendment, and we're heading in the right direction, Nolly.
Yep.
That due to the severe drought conditions, and if Councillor Very cannot attend the meeting from the 31st of October to Sunday, 3rd of November, that Councillor Bob Rogan will, as an alternative, will attend that. As simple as that, Councillor?
Yeah.
And we'll just move that as the recommendation, or a separate deal, Nolene? It is an amendment? Okay.
It'll be separate.
Okay. So, Councillor Very, you're moving that as an amendment? Yeah. So you're happy with the simple wording as that is? Yeah. Councillor Rogan, your name's mentioned. Would you be happy to second that? Thank you. Okay. I think in the sake of transparency and keeping going, I don't think we need any comment or to move in a second, unless you wish to deal with that. Councillor Very? No, happy to move the amendment. Councillors, all in favour? The amendment's now part of the office's recommendation. Before I do wish to thank Councillor Very. He's been on that as a board member there for a number of years, and it is important. Councillor Very, you do a great job, and with the battles you have there, and with the Northwest Board, they do a pretty good job, and being on the board, and especially here from Tenterfield, I do commend you on efforts you've been making there, and thank you for your longevity there. Yes. All good. All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, move on to page 31 in your hard copy. It's item COM10/19. It's released to Tenterfield District Community FM Radio Association Incorporated. In Manor Street, Tenterfield, can I have a mover and seconder to deal with this, please? Councillor Rogan, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Michael Petrie, and I thank you. And I'll hand over to the Chief Corporate Officer to present this item.
I'll start off presenting the item. As I said, Heidi and her team, in particular Jennifer, have done a lot of work on this side. Firstly, I'd like to thank Peter for his comments this morning, but also for bearing with us as we've tried to negotiate this. We've talked a lot about it, and the intent of this agreement is simply for Council to recognise, I guess, in a transparent way, that assistance that we are providing to 10FM. So there's absolutely no intention, if Council wishes to make any changes to what we've proposed, we're more than happy to see those. And I do apologise for the error under option A, which is 10%, so Peter is correct. The staff have been working on this, as we said, for some time to try and make it transparent about the assistance that we are providing to groups. So we've made absolutely, as an administration, no comment or thought on what the level of that assistance should be, purely to try and get it formalised. Also to give 10FM the comfort and a lease and an agreement that they can actually use for their own purposes or to attract their own funding. There is the clause in there too that Peter did talk about in his presentation, which was very good, was under section 356. This would constitute, and you'll see on the document that he's printed out for you, thank you again, that public notice is not required to if the financial assistance is part of a specific program. And this is the program, I guess, and why we're trying to get it included in Council's operational plan to give that concurrency to 10FM, that we will honour that agreement for the period that it exists. The Section 356 grants is what is spoken about in the financial contributions agreement, whereby And I guess there's been a lot of ongoing discussion that if we're going to enter into an agreement that provides a specific subsidy with a financial amount, whether or not that current allocation that we have of $45,000 needs to be spread over other community groups that perhaps don't have the level of support that this organisation does. Having said that, we've heard from Peter today, and once again, thank him for that again. And if council wishes to remove that clause, that's up to council, but the consideration needs to be given about whether or not that $45,000 allocation, which we increased this year for other community groups, then will sustain what we'd like to do more broadly. So I'll hand over to Heidi. Do you want to talk about the process?
Thank you. Well, we've had lots of discussions, obviously, with 10FM, and lots of investigations. We've outlined as much of the detail as we can in the report with the history. So we've been supporting 10FM since 1989, just with peppercorn lease of $1 per annum, and this has just continued. At some time, the leases have expired, and this latest one did expire in 2013. So it's prompted us to, as Kylie mentioned, just look at the total support that council's being able to provide 10FM and quantify it. So we also looked at the building. We had our building condition assessment report done, so we were able to get a clear understanding of what works are really required to this building to maintain it and to keep it in a good working order. And we also reviewed the commercial rental that building could obtain should it be leased out in the marketplace, which was about $8,500 per annum. So we developed the financial contribution agreement that you all have a copy of, and we have provided a couple of options there for the lease, for the rent. The lease will help assist 10FM in seeking a grant for their solar panels that they're wanting to apply for. However, we strongly feel that we really need to address the state and the condition of the roof prior to putting solar panels on there, because they are coming to the end of their life, and it would seem a big waste of resources to install those panels on a roof that has a very short lifespan thereafter. So hence we've had a look at those, and we've got a current quote for almost $19,000 to do that. It's also been identified there's some other works and general repairs and maintenance that we need to address in that building as well, which has been outlined in the report. We've also just highlighted some recent expenditure for you, for your understanding. So last year in November 2018, we completed the new storage shed at the back, which was of a heritage, to fit in with the heritage precinct there, and 10FM currently use half of the shed and council uses the other half. And then our expenses are listed here for 10FM as well, with the building and the shed depreciation, so forth, at just over $44,000, and then the costs for the digital tower, which is just under 30. However, 10FM do share the tower with WIN and also Rebel Radio as well. So that just paints the overview for you, so you have a clear idea of how we're assisting 10FM and where the money that we're spending. Through all that investigation, we basically came up with the two options, one for the 10% and another for a nominal amount of about $500 per annum, which is, for your consideration. And our recommendation also includes for you to delegate authority to sign a 3-year lease, and also the 3-year financial contribution under the seal of course, by the Mayor and the Chief Executive. So that's just in summary.
Thank you, Heidi. Questions to Kylie or Heidi to do with the report, councillors? Councillor Bronwyn?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think it's a good idea to get this done. We're finally getting our leases in order, and congratulations, Heidi. Also, congratulations to 10FM on the financial turnaround that they've achieved over the
Noted.
years,
Yep.
as well as the community service they provide, and in fact the personal development opportunities they provide, especially to kids. I was just wondering, with the alteration in the financials, do we need to alter anything here in the motion? And if we do delete that clause F from the agreement, does that need to be reflected in the motion? I mean, I'm happy to delete it because, as Mr Robinson said, whenever we discuss what community allocations we give, we take into account what people have already had, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily serve a purpose by having it in there. So.
Can I just, so everyone's on the same page, and Councillor Bronwyn, correct me if I'm wrong, you're referring to clause F, and that's obviously to do with the financial contributions agreement on page 36 of the hard copy. Yep, all good.
So I mean, under number 4 of the motion, which is authorise the lease, do we have to, if we agree to withdraw clause F and
Right.
clause G will become clause F, do we need to alter anything in the motion, or do we just make a decision to alter the lease separately without it being reflected in the actual motion?
Yep. Fair question. Colin?
So probably procedurally, the best way to attack that is just to look at number 1 in the officer's recommendation, and where we've got option X, option X for inclusion, A or B or an alternative or variant, is just there that the council determines option whatever, A or B, being 10%, or option B, a nominal fee, and removes clause F from the draft agreement, and that'll be fine. Because once again, we'll go back and issue the agreement without that particular clause in there.
That's your question.
So we don't need
Councillor.
to change 1, 2, 4 and 5. We will simply draft it with that, and we'll also amend the schedule, because we do need to amend the schedule under part 5 for monetary and in-kind support to reflect whichever option council chooses. So at the end of the day, it's just to sign the agreement as council decides, and then to issue that.
So, Colin, so myself and the councillors are clear, so do we need to, what you're speaking of with what Councillor Bronwyn Petrie raised, do we need that as an amendment today to actually, at this council meeting, to note that we're taking clause F out of this agreement?
You have an officer's recommendation.
Yes.
You're going to need to move a motion
Yep.
to put your option up, and
Yep.
at the end of whichever option or variant you choose,
Yeah.
include there
Okay.
and remove
Okay.
item F from the proposed agreement.
Okay. Councillors, I do need to remind you, and what good staff we have. Colin, thank you for your advice, and that staff are here solely for that, to help us make decisions. They do not vote, or need to in any way or form encourage us to vote either way. Their advice is purely to do with operational matters, and we are very lucky to have good staff to help us down that road. So I just want to note that, Colin, thank you. Before I go to you, Councillor, and we'll deal with that, is there any other questions to Colin to do with the report? Councillor Rogan, yes?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Before we actually get to voting on the original recommendation, which is option X, you know, and you've got those 2 options, A and B, I just want to clarify the percentage there, because, you know, we recognise that there's an error, which Mr Robinson brought up, but Kylie's still referring to that option A as 10%. So is that correct? Is the figure of 1,296.79 the actual figure that we're dealing with? Or should it be $648.39? So should we be talking 5% or 10%?
Good question. We'll go to our CE. Thank you, Councillor Rogan.
Through you, Mr Mayor, option A should have read 10% at $1,296.
Not 5. So we just note that, sorry, Councillor McNish,
5% figure that's wrong, Peter, not the actual monetary figure.
yeah, that's right.
So I've just changed it.
So it's a typo.
And I still want that.
Yeah, of course you can, Councillor Rogan. You always get your 2 bobs worth, Councillor.
So thanks for clarifying that. So that makes my next comment fairly easy. I believe 10% would be a bit too much of an imposition for 10FM. So my stance would be to support option B. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor.
Yeah, so we should remove.
Just think. Any other questions to do with the report? I'm going to deal with the change that we need to make in a minute. Councillor Very, yes?
Wasn't a question, it's just a comment.
Yeah.
I'd just like to thank Pete Robinson for his presentation. I think a presentation with something like this always helps clear the air.
Yep.
Thanks.
Good, thank you. Yes, councillor Peters? Being out, and I do need, before I go to you, councillor Peters, and I thank you for the long-standing effort that you've made as a delegate to 10FM. You've been there for a long time, councillor, and it goes noted today, I can tell you. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to say I think that the 10FM board and the volunteers have done a great job over the years and run the station, got it out of debt, and things are going very well as far as I can see.
Yep.
And they need all the support we can give them.
Yep.
And I'd like to go with option B.
Yep. Thank you, councillor. Councillor Bromwell, I'll go to you now.
Yeah, likewise, Mr Mayor, so my preference is option B, but we just need to fix that wording so we can get rid of what I would propose, depending on how many other councillors support it,
Yep.
removal of clause F
Yep.
in the agreement.
As an amendment.
So we'll do it as an amendment, councillor? Yep,
So I need a
it
second.
needs to be an amendment. Well, no,
Is that
happy, we
onto
just
one
need to get,
afterwards? Yep.
I was going to say we can add it on to item number 1 because council needs to resolve their direction. So we've put up an officer's report for
Yep.
consideration by council, and item 1 requires council to make a decision. So in moving of that motion, it is that the decision council determines option B,
Yep.
in this instance, that council determines option B for inclusion in the agreement and removes clause F,
Yep.
becomes the
Yep.
motion.
yep,
Yep.
okay.
Okay?
Yeah, you wanna move
So
along
coun-
those lines?
yeah, so council
Council.
determines option B for inclusion in the agreement
Yep.
and removes clause F
Yep,
of said agreement.
or the financial contribution agreement.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, and we have a second, councillor Very. Does anyone want to speak to the amendment or against the amendment? No? To move in a second, did you wish to speak? Councillor Bromwell? Okay, right, thank you, councillors. So we'll put the amendment, all in favour of the amendment? All in favour of the amendment? Against? So we're all, I'll just stop there. So everyone's good? Don't need any more clarity on this? Okay, good. So the amendment's in this, now we move that the amendment becomes part of the officer's recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. We good now? Councillors, I do apologise just for some, with the order of business, I haven't mentioned that there's some, do with the Merrill Minute, there's no Merrill Minute and recommendation for items to be considered in the confidential section, we don't have any. So I apologise for that. Move on to page 39 in your hard copy. It's item COM 11/19, it's the draft footpath activity policy amendment to local approvals, policy number 3.121. Can I move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Murray, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Michael Petrie, thank you. And I once again hand over to the Chief of Corporate Officer of the Chief Corporate Officer.
Thank you very much,
Hi.
Mr Mayor. So as council's aware, over time we've been going through and trying to conduct a review of our policies and make sure that, one, they are succinct and current. This one's been a little bit overdue for review. What's happened essentially is trying to incorporate all of council's policies that relate to footpath activities into one policy. We did have some issue in and around confusion whereby people would be trying to, or certainly businesses, look at one particular policy to the exclusion of the other. So Mark and his team have done a lot of work to put together the new draft footpath activities policy in there, and also to make the necessary amendments to the existing local approvals policy to remove any of those items where there was a double up so that we didn't get out of sync with the policy application. They are policies that do require exhibition, and also council to actually accept comments from the public for a period of 42 days, and should those comments come back to consider those. So the recommendations there that if there is no commentary received, that they would then be enacted. If there is any commentary received, that then they would come back to council for review of that commentary. So these deal with the putting on exhibition these two new policies. The other policies will still be in existence while these are exhibited until such time as council adopts the new one following the exhibition period.
Thank you, Kylie. Questions to Kylie to do with the report? Councillor Verry, then I'll go to you, Councillor Bromman.
It's a bit of a Dorothy Dix one, but does this policy apply in the villages, like Urbanville?
I believe that
Right
it
across the shire,
applies
isn't
everywhere. That's what
Yeah.
I was going to say. They are local laws.
As I said, Dorothy Dix.
Regardless. Yeah, no, that's, sorry, I thought there might have been a curly one to that.
No,
because that's my,
I just wanted to get it out there for the people to understand.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kylie, that when we say that it's on exhibition, this gets put on exhibition and advertised like at Legume Shop or the library at Urbanville and all that. So I'm sharing that with you, Councillor Verry, that that's standard what we do. And it is advertised. Yeah. Councillor Bromman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, just on that, on the second page, under policy statement, it actually says that council officers will carry out inspections within the immediate central business district of Tenterfield. So perhaps that might need alteration. The pages aren't numbered, but it's on the first there.
Thank you.
So whether that might need an amendment. But on the next page over, halfway down, where it says all tables, chairs, signage, goods and/or display stands shall be secured. How do you secure chairs? Because the next dot point, they've all got to be removed from the footpath when the premises are closed. So I can understand tables and things having to be weighted down, but chairs? When someone isn't sitting on them? Thank you,
A
Councillor.
voice from the deep.
So where it says policy statement, turn the page up, so it's actually the third physical page over, left-hand side. Starts with goods at the top. Come down the sixth one, it says all tables, chairs, signage, goods and shall be secured.
I think that comes back, as we said, to the definition of secured. So, you know, if a chair's behind a barrier or whatever, so long as it can't take off, and that's my understanding, but I'll verify that with Mark.
Yes, or whether the wording is that, you know, they're of a heavy enough construction that they're not going to...
Blow away in the
They're not
wind.
plastic
Yep.
chairs that'll blow away.
Yep.
So it's just that one. The one above says no glass or breakables, which is a reiteration of two before that. It says no glass or breakable goods. Maybe it's fine to leave it in there because it's re-emphasising the fact that you shouldn't have glass. That's fine. But we might need to look at that Tenterfield wording the page before as well. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor McNish.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just what I think is one omission there is the raffles, which are conducted on a weekly basis by outside what they call the Benevolent Society now. Should that be in this policy as well? Because it is a footpath activity.
Yeah. No, fair question.
They do, and I'm happy to take that on notice and look into it more, but they do actually have approval to undertake those activities. It's just where it fits in. So the raffles, etc., do have approval to operate on the...
And I'll just, without confusing the councillor, Councillor McNish, you've raised a good point. Kylie, each organisation, and correct me if I'm wrong, they actually apply to council to have those, to book a site, don't they?
Yes, correct. We have approvals process even for busking. So under section 68, we actually issue approvals for the like, and you'll see a list of those in the fees and charges as well as to the costs attributable to those.
Yeah, I'll come back there. Nothing over this side? Sorry. I'll go to Councillor Verry.
Just Councillor McNish's question, I think it comes under the busking policy.
No, it's just
Separate.
Is it? I thought it was under the busking policy,
You're talking about the raffles, councillor?
the raffles.
Organisations? Okay.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's clear this right up. So, Kylie, with what we're talking about, with a charitable organisation, whatever, when they do that, it does sit under this policy because it is a footpath activity?
Yes, I believe so, but as I said, I'm just going to have to seek some clarity, so I can send that out to you.
Right, Councillor Petrie. Bromman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The document's quite right in that it's under economic, etc. It says how by enabling this activity, it enhances the economic viability of our businesses, and it provides a more vibrant and colourful atmosphere for shoppers, and it's very good for people driving through. They see, and like it has been said that, like with the current drought, impact on local businesses, etc., the passing traffic, if they see our streets are vibrant and active, it will encourage them. So to that end, I know we looked at it last year with the drought funding, waiving fees for those businesses. I'd just like to foreshadow how we think about how we, I know it's a minuscule amount in the overall scheme of things of $4,000 odd,
Yeah.
but we need to really think how we could do that to encourage, give some bit of an incentive for our businesses to continue to do that. So, which is not
Are you talking with the licence at a
with the waive
business?
the fees, yeah.
Yeah, and we have spoke about it before, not very long ago, I think, councillor, with respect, yeah. Only 12 months ago, I thought.
Last workshop.
There you go. Yeah. I'll come to you, councillor. Yeah, but anyway, your comments are noted, and we have workshopped this, and obviously, councillors, and I need to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kylie or Mr CE, with number 3, accept submissions. Councillors can put in a submission, like I mean for this, in the draft. Now, be fully aware of that, you're a ratepayer, so that's there. So don't say, well, why didn't I know, or how do we, wanted to do something. But councillor Rogan, I'll go to you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate that it was spoken about last workshop just the other day, and I was led to believe at the time when I brought something up that this should go to the fees and charges committee. I'm not sure when that's due to sit again.
I'll have some comment there, councillor.
Yeah, so what we, and correct me if I'm wrong, what we spoke about, I thought, was in council's budget deliberations, which will kick off January, February, that we would then review those fees and charges at that point in time with a view for that year to offer that, for council to consider not charging that fee and charge at that point in time. So in terms of when it's enacted, at the moment, most vendors have already gone through those licensing requirements at this point in time. You'll see that from the operational plan, so that's done. So as I said, it would be up to council if they wish to, when the policy comes into effect, because at the moment we're charging under a couple of different policies, that if it came into effect, they might like to not charge a fee from then on. However, the majority of your businesses have paid, so the best, I suppose, bang for buck is next year is to put in your operational plan and manage your budget going forward to say we won't charge that fee in recognition of the business hardship that's happening at the moment.
You have with that reply, councillor?
Thank you.
And fingers crossed if we can get it done. I'm very much hoping that we'll adopt a budget again in May to give staff some time to actually implement those processes prior to that. But of course, that's up to council when we get to in the process.
Councillor Murray, you've indicated a question to the report.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. How does all this fit in with public liability? Do they come at it from another angle?
Question?
So as part of that, we do actually ask for people who are seeking approval to demonstrate that they've got the appropriate insurance to indemnify us from their activities.
What I'm getting at here is, by the time you make a claim, public liability might come out and say, well, no, that does not come into this particular situation. So there is no connection between council and public liability, obviously.
If council to issue the approval, we do ask for those businesses to show us their insurance so that then we can provide that to our insurer. Even if council was to consider not to apply a fee, we would still request that people put in those applications and provided us with a copy of their insurance indemnifying us.
Answer your question, councillor? Yeah, thank you. Okay, councillors, any other questions to do with the report?
Just my apologies, I wasn't at the workshop because we were fighting fires.
Yep. It's all good, Bob.
And through you, Mr Mayor, we will, as I said, we can have certainly more workshops on this of council. We've put in the recommendation that if you get no submissions, that we start with that policy, but if you wish to change that, that's within council's purview also.
Okay. Councillor McNish.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just as a follow-on to that question about the street stalls, Kylie, I was wondering if it could be looked at to change the position. They used to be held outside, well, I call it Mitchell's Shoes, I think it's the Vietnamese restaurant.
Are you referring to the raffles?
Raffles.
The wood raffles, okay.
And that was a good spot because you captured all the people walking across pedestrian crossing. and the little man who's had a little cafe there after Mitchell's shoe shop stopped, he complained to council that the people selling raffle tickets were impeding people going into his restaurant. And so it was actually moved up the road. But I've heard a lot of people saying that it's such a dead area up there, they put a whole day's work in for bugger all. So I was wondering if it could be looked at to change the position of the street stalls, perhaps down to more towards the news agency rather than up the other end where they do get the passing traffic. Yep.
More than happy to take that one on notice,
Yeah.
councillor, and have a further conversation as needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Okay, councillors, the officers' order, please. The officers' recommendations there, all in favour of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, move on to page 42. It's item ENV 18/19. It's amendment to 219-220 fees and charges, water network, bulk water sales from council's standpipe. Can I have a move in a second to deal with this item? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Murray, and I thank you. It's my pleasure that I hand over to our CE to present this.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, it's pretty self-explanatory. When we looked at the original charge, the idea was to make it abhorrently expensive so that people put tanks on and stop using the water. Since then, the amount of rainfall we've got's been even less than the preceding 6 months. It's to the stage now where someone could have 100 tanks and it wouldn't make any difference. So we were holding the fee off until the Apex Park bore was turned on because we didn't have an alternate. Now that we've got an alternate, having looked at the fee, I thought it'd be a good idea for council to revisit it, bearing in mind we've had such little rain. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Questions to the CE to do with this report? Councillor Bronwyn?
No, this is the second kilolitre. Can we just swap the R and the E at the end, please?
Typo.
Through Mr Mayor, that was left in to see if Councillor Ron Petrie, the spelling guru, picked it up.
Councillor Very, question? Order. Councillor Very.
Just a comment, Mr Mayor, about the water tanks. Southern Down are seriously looking at subsidising water tanks for their ratepayers, and Liston been getting water from Stanthorpe via donations from Rotary, etc.
Yep. I'm aware of that, councillor. Any other questions to do with the report, councillors? Councillor McNish?
More comment, Mr Mayor. To be very, very brave council that up to $6.20 to $25 now. I've had a few queries about that, so it's around the town that council's going to do that, and I said there's absolutely no way.
Yep.
Just as someone who drives past the Apex bore every day, a couple of times, there's always utes there filling up, so it's been
Well received.
well received.
It has been. Well, councillor, you can share with your constituents how hard you fought to stop that $25 today.
I'll say it was just me.
That's it. Noted, councillor. Okay, the officer's recommendations there, and thank you, Mr C, and it's fully supported. All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, move on to page 45 in your hard copy, item ENV 19/19. Relief for not-for-profit organisations impacted by September fire events, waste charges. Can I have a move and a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Very, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Sawyer, thank you. And once again, I'll hand over to our CE to present this report.
Through Mr Mayor, it's pretty self-explanatory. Happy to take questions by exception.
Questions to our CE to do with it? Councillor Bronwyn, yes?
There were several, besides these two clubs, there were several homeowners and some farmers terribly impacted with those fires.
Yep.
Two in particular who've suffered considerable damage and will need to take those items, like entire sheds.
Yep.
Is there any consideration for those people, or will we be charging those individuals for tip fees?
Big question. See?
Through Mr Mayor, I took this up with the Office of Emergency Management. Actually, it came up in the February-March fires as well. Currently, those on deemed on low income can apply for grants to dispose of burnt or destroyed property. Those not deemed on low incomes have to pay, and those insured, the insurance companies pick the tabs up. I put it to council that if council were to introduce changes to the current modus operandi that the OEM has, it would open up a can of worms, because number one, we can't budget for it, and number two, does that mean floods? Does that mean other things as well? Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, I do wish to note, and for the comments you've made, and it is relevant. In the recent community meeting at Drake, these things were raised, and council will work, and our CEO has explained it as good as it can be. We'll work as closely as we can with our community to ease the pain whichever way we can. But it is an issue to do with waste, especially after fire, and that was noted at Drake the other day. And the CEO, to go back to the February-March fires, he's been working tirelessly with Public Works and Mr. CEO to try and get a resolution to do with contaminated waste, and that hasn't gone so well. Not from our part, but from the Public Works part, and I think it finally was just getting some light in the tunnel just recently, wasn't he?
You wouldn't believe this, but the Friday the fire started, we opened up the cell for the asbestos from the February-March fires at Bunnabanoo.
That's how long it took. Anyway, so yeah, any more questions to do with the report?
Well placed with this fire then.
Yeah, we should be, councillor. Yes.
Three,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. As a matter of fact, we are. Due to the size of the excavation required at Bunnabanoo, we actually think we've got enough room there to have the asbestos, and there's been 6 properties identified having asbestos contaminated waste, and they haven't, not even halfway through yet. So we suspect that there could be another 10 or 12 properties identified as having asbestos. We deliberately over-excavated. We should have enough capacity at Bunnabanoo to cope with the extra asbestos from these fires as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
Comment or question, councillor? Yes.
Question. Can I ask Councillor Rogan, because it's to do with the archery club?
Yep.
Even though he's, Bob, it says all the archery targets were destroyed, so all the wool packs, are they? I mean, I can see them still standing there, but have they all been?
Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, of course you can, councillor.
Bronwyn, all our field course targets are all gone, all those wall packs disappeared. There are 6 left, so if you've seen any, would have been those 6 there in the middle, which was a cleared area where our practice area is, and that's all that remains. We had a total of 56, 60 or something, so they're all gone. The main issue with waste out there is 2 types of waste that we have. The club's doing what it can to replace all those wool packs and stuff, so the waste is green waste, or actually black waste, from all the stuff we've cut off the tracks. And that's put in piles. And the other is, back in the day, now I don't know what day, but a long time ago, it used to be, residents have told me, a council tip, or it was a dump. There's a lot of waste that's metal, glass, crockery, that is now all exposed because there's no grass left anymore.
And no topsoil.
And that's the stuff we've got a real issue with. The club doesn't have the resources to sort of deal with that part of it.
Yep.
So having this considered would be really good for the club, and I'm sure the pistol clubs are in the same boat. So all those wool bales are gone. There's half a dozen left, Bronwyn, that's all, in the middle.
I was wondering what was inside that.
So they're filled with anything that'll stop an arrow, so plastic, straw, hay, whatever we can get.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, the reports there. All in favour of the officer's recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, we move on to our page 48 in the hard copy. It's item GOV 57/19. It's the monthly operational report for August. Can I move in a second to deal with this report, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Murray, thank you. And once again, I hand over to our Chief Executive.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, This is probably our most lean and rushed monthly operation report we've written since February last year, predominantly due to staff being otherwise engaged with the fires, and also myself and others as well engaged with the emergency water project. Happy to take any questions by exception.
Thank you, Mr. CE. Questions to the CE to do with the report? Councillor Bob Rogan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you to the CE. I have two questions, if that's allowed.
Of course it is.
First one on page 22, I think.
Yep.
Economic growth and tourism. Just
Apologise, Councillor. Page 22.
yes.
Yep.
It's just a question about, there's a note here that says they're investigating the potential of a combined research project with National Parks and Southern Cross University. I just wonder whether we can be enlightened on what that's about.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm not privy of it myself. I'll have to take that on notice.
Okay, the second question there is on page 97, stormwater and drainage. This is something that's sort of been of interest to me for some time, and I notice, so page 97, yeah, I noticed that pretty much any drainage within the town itself has been on the back burner for a while, and I get why, because money was and resources were allocated to bridges and that sort of thing. But it's been on the back burner for some time, just not the last 12 months. And in the budget, I think there was a little bit of money left there, if I read it correctly. So I'm just wondering whether now it's so dry, wouldn't this be the right time to allocate something to drainage? Because otherwise, when we do have the drought break, we could end up with a lot of rain, whenever that might be, and we might wish we had done something with drainage. Thanks.
So, Councillor, just for some clarity, and one, you'll be referring to like the spoon drains in town and stuff like that to get them cleaned out?
Yeah, particularly on the high points of town on the western side.
Yep.
I've had some complaints from residents. Councillor Forbes and I went up there and spoke to a resident about this. I've spoken to residents a couple of times as far back as last year.
Yep.
About, I'm trying to think, I think it might be Riley Street, but anyway, those streets that run sort of west to east on that western side of town.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you. Did you want to comment, Mr. C?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'd have to investigate and talk with staff. There's a couple of drainage projects that Mr Council, the Manager of Asset and Program Planning, spoke to me about a few months ago. It's right, though, the staff have been concentrating on timber bridges. We've knocked over 13 bridges so far out of the 16 problematic ones. The tenders have been let for the 3 new ones, which will be quite good.
Great.
We've also done the investigation to the remaining 30, and 16 of those need work from memory. Would that be right? Yeah, so there's another 16. 16 seems to be the magic number with timber bridges, because the first lot was 16. But there is a couple of things there. There has actually been some work, some investigations already done. Not a lot. Basically, Mr Council has gone through and looked at previous surveys and so on. There's a couple of easy things to fix, but there's one drainage line through it's actually probably the northernmost third of town that's a little bit problematic, that needs some work done to it. But what I might do is for the next 2 officers to report to council next month when they do their monthly operational spiel, is actually ask Mr Council to come along as that manager of assets and program planning to talk about it, so that you can hear straight from the horse's mouth what they're up to and what's been going on and what's planned.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Mr CE. Would it help if I showed Mr Council the ones where the complaints are coming from?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions to do with the monthly operational report? I'll go to you, Councillor Very. Councillor Roman, you're indicating? Yes? Then I'll go to you. Councillor Very.
The yellow, to Fiona, the yellow paint looks really good on the Mount Lindsay. Stands out and you can see it.
No, it does look good. Very effective. Councillor Roman, you had a question to the report?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, on the report, I just wanted to commend recognising Declan Riley's achievements at the end there on page 113, our youngest member there in manufacturing some of the products as shown by the pictures, which are, exceptional. And with the emergency stuff, I'd also like to commend Carl, the dozer driver, who got a big tick from my boy, who said, which is a hard yard, but he said he's
Tough judge.
He's a wonderful operator.
Good.
The other thing is on page 104 with the transport network, and got vegetation removal at the moment from the fires. I want to commend council and particularly Terry and Andre for the vegetation removal they had done last year on Billarimba and Scrub Roads, because had that not happened, those fires would have been much worse, and in fact those roads would have been untrafficable during those events, and especially with the smoke and stuff. So they're the kudos. I was just wondering, page 23, where the website is. I know we've been told it's nearly there. And page 48, a question on the emergency services. About lessons learned from the February fires have seen massive improvements in safety and operational functions in these fires. I was wondering what these massive improvements were. And finally, on page 103, I was just wondering what's happening with potential for ash in the dam. As Councillor Rogan said, it will rain again one day, and I know they've put rock there, but I'm just wondering what other filtration might be in place, because if we get heavy downpour, there's going to be all sorts of ash come off Dairyman.
Okay, Councillor, you raised three questions there. Now, can we deal, correct me if I'm wrong, page 23 was one? Let's deal with that one first. Question was there.
When is the website going to be released?
Through Mr Mayor, if Nolene's available to speak to that, she knows more about it than I do.
Councillor Hyde?
Yes, councillors, we've had a few hiccups with it. We've had some staff leave, we've had a few hiccups, but we've actually now just put Sarah back on contract, and she's doing that work from home. So I'm hopeful it'll be up and running. I was hoping by the end of September, but I would like to say about mid-October.
Thank you. And the other one was, Councillor, page 48 you mentioned?
Page 48.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Mr Mayor.
Yep.
The improvements have been largely internal to council. When we had the February-March fires, it took, I think, 48 or 72 hours to get the local emergency management centre up and running. In the first couple of days of the fire, basically myself, Barry Frew and James Bowden from the police, we basically ran the fire on our mobile phones and any way we could. During this fire, and I suspect it's because the Ebor fire had already started down there, the District Emergency Management Centre was already stood up. So it was really, really easy for council, one of our Limos, which is Wes Hoffman, who lives at Deepwater. He continued from Deepwater to Glen Innes to the centre, and council's response to the RFS was almost immediate as a result of that. Also, Mr Hoffman and Mr Pater, the Works Manager and Acting HR Manager, and also Mr Brad Phone, the Workshop Manager, they'd had numerous meetings planning for council's response should there be fires this year. They actually had 9 meetings between the fires in March and the fires that started in September. Consequently, when council went to supply the services to the RFS, everything went off without a glitch. Whereas when we went to supply the services in February, not all of our operators were fireground trained. Every single operator now has got the ticket to do whatever they've got to do in relation to coming onto a fire scene. They're all trained, they're all versed with it. We've got all the fire kits now because they've got a special kits when they go into a fire ground in their vehicles. And basically, it is not only those three people, it's everyone that's been involved, but the preparedness that council had largely a result of what happened in February and March, although it wasn't bad in February and March, it was just caught everyone a little bit off guard and flat-footed. The preparedness meant that our response was seamless, and I haven't heard any criticism of council's response of either the public, the RFS or anyone, to be honest.
It's only been praised, Mr C, I can tell you that.
So, and that was largely due to good pre-planning.
Yep. And now that you
Yeah,
nominate another councillor?
Yeah, look, thanks for that explanation, because what we've seen in the field is that there's actually been very little improvement in our fires being controlled from Glen Innes, especially when they've had other huge fires on their radar down that way. Still, once again, despite our meeting we had in March, no decision-making ability here in Tenterfield. Later, they did make a decision-making ability in Drake, which helped, but nothing here for ages at all, and messages were not getting to the field, either at all or in a timely manner. The final question was page 123, ash into the dam.
115, councillor?
120. Through Mr Mayor, I can answer that. There's been two discussions in two separate entities, both with the state government. The first one was last Monday week with DPIW, who met with Council's emergency project, water project engineer, David Wolfton, and myself. It was actually the Monday after the fire started, in relation to the official name for it is biological sequential filtration, otherwise known as leaky weirs. And the idea is to catch as much of the sediment in a more natural way than traditional civil engineering methods, which require usually large structures and a lot of maintenance. In addition, we're speaking to DOIW on it, and having them include that in the integrated water catchment management planning, which we've nearly finished. I brought the same matter up with the Office of Emergency Management on Tuesday afternoon. They've initiated a waste, environment and infrastructure subcommittee, which I think are meeting tomorrow afternoon. I should know because I'm going to be on it. Yeah. And they're going to be looking at sourcing money or monies from the Environmental Protection Authority and somewhere else, I forget where they said, but I think the majority was the EPA, to do the same thing. So the next step is when the Environmental Waste and Infrastructure OEM meeting occurs, is to invite Mark Watson from DIW, Coffs Harbour, and David Wolfton, our project engineer, to that meeting to discuss those two, that issue.
We're heading in the right direction. Councillor, to do with your last question, and it is, it has been mentioned, and it is of concern, but I'm sure that we'll be dealing with it, if and when that happens. As far as the ash, to do with that burnt country above the dam, it is concerning. But anyway, we have a filtration system there, but I know it'll be a lot of work through that.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, the main problem is it will deoxygenate the dam pretty quickly. It actually changes the pH of the water very, very significantly, and makes it, I don't know whether the pH goes up or goes down, but it makes it difficult to process. And the third thing is our filters are 29%, particularly as summer approaches, they'll start to struggle. And as the dam drops even further, if we get a large ingress of material, the filters will really, really struggle. And at the moment, we've had a little bit of a setback with the reverse osmosis plant because all the lines got burnt, but they're fixing that at the moment. The reverse osmosis plant is recycling water that goes, that's used in the backwash for the water filtration plant. It's adding water from the bore to make it a little bit not as viscous, lower the viscosity, and it's going back through the plant, so we're not actually wasting any water. If we had a big ingress of silt and burnt material into the dam, I've got my doubts whether the RO plant would cope with the viscosity of the water being increased.
Yeah.
So just on that, is there any way then we should be looking at putting some of that sediment stuff along Hawkins Gully up to their little bridge and along the road edges, say out past Landers Lane there?
Short answer is I'm not real keen on fabric sediment control and that. If we had a gully raker, that's all just going to end up ripped apart and wrapped around trees and things like that. I'm more interested in using some older methods, in fact, than that method. Something, and Fiona might know the name of those rolls that look like giant,
Yeah.
giant brushes.
Yeah.
As against geofabric, because I think it's just, well, my personal view with geofabric, it's not as good, and if it ends up somewhere where it shouldn't be, it's more problematic.
What if you put those sediment controls to slow that water down along those roads in that close vicinity?
Yeah, leaky weirs.
Yeah, that's referring to. Okay, is there any more comment or questions to do with the monthly report? No? Reports there, councillors, all happy to receive the officer's recommendation. Against? Carried. Councillors, move on to page 49, your hard copy, item GOV 58/19, Local Roads and Transport Congress 219 at Henoff in South Australia, 18...
Harndorf.
Harndorf. Harndorf, thank you, Nolene. I'm only from Benalbo. South Australia, 18th to 20th, 219. Can I move in a second to deal with this one, please? Councillor Very, thank you. Second by Councillor Bromman, and I thank you. And before we go, there is a little amendment to do with one, isn't there, Mr CE?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we'll need to adjust that to acting / Director of Engineering, and the reason I need to change that is that we're interviewing for the new director before the Congress is due, and if that's the case and Mrs Keneally is successful, she will no longer be the acting engineering director. If that's the case and the current acting director isn't successful and the new director has started, which is doubtful because normally with that situation there's a couple of months grace, it may be different. So we need to amend that so we've got all bases covered.
It's just going to be Director Engineering.
It should be acting oblique director of engineering, so it can either be the active director of engineering or director of engineering.
Yeah. Councillors, we'll just make that change. We don't need, you happy if we don't do an amendment there? Just so long as we're all aware. And it's, it just needed a bit of a tidy up. Okay. Questions? Comment? Oh, apologise. Did I get a move in a second? I didn't. Moving right ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, and Councillor Brian Petrie seconded.
Sorry.
Yeah. Any questions to our CE or comments to do with this, attending this? Councillor Bromman, question?
On the agenda, it's got there about the drones. I was just wondering do we use drones here already? I know we did a lot of, our staff did some courses in drone work, just to do with roading.
Yeah. Do you want to comment, Mr CE or Fiona?
I'll ask Fiona and also Kylie, because we use it in both directorates.
Good.
I'll let you go, I've said a lot this morning.
Knocked up.
Oh, at present, we're not doing a lot with drones, but there's plenty of opportunity on bridges and associated infrastructure, and the staff have been trained, but at this stage we haven't actually done a lot of work in the field, in the road side of things at least.
So the opportunity, I think you'll remember in the grant for the weeds management, there's actually provision in there to purchase a drone. And I was only talking to the weeds officer yesterday. Now, obviously, the drone needs to provide the level of support to weeds because that's what the funding was provided for. It does give the staff the opportunity to actually look at that with different applications. And I was only speaking to Chris about yesterday about actually engaging with those other sections of council to make sure that we've got the appropriate software in place to upload some of those images and attach them to our mapping should we need to use that for a different purpose. So he's just in the process of developing a scope, I guess, to purchase that particular drone, which was, to my understanding, be the first one that we own.
Councillor Very, question to the report?
Just about the drones, it's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah.
Or it is a question as well. Can we use them for tourism? They've been extremely successful where they've uploaded, or what do you call it, onto the whatever, with tourism. You know, you take a shot and you put it on whatever, Facebook or whatever, and they've been extremely successful if you get the right type of shot on there for tourism selling Tenterfield.
More than happy once it's fulfilled, obviously, its primary purpose to be used across the organisation for whatever council
That's exactly right.
deems necessary.
Very good. Okay, councillors, for the no more questions, the officer's recommendations there. All in favour of the officer's recommendation? Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to page 53 in your hard copy. Item GOV 63/19, it's the Christmas New Year close down for 2/19/20. Can I move in a second to deal with this item, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Rogan, thank you. And I hand over to our CE to present this one.
Through Mr Mayor, this is the same process that we do every year, and we'll take questions by exception.
Any questions, councillors? Comment? All in favour? Against? Carried. Page 55. Item GOV 59/19, 2/18/19 financial statements to be deferred for audit. Can I move in a second to deal with this one, please? Oh, sorry, referred. We're pretty good at, we don't defer too much at all, actually. Okay, can I move in a second to here? Councillor Rogan, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor, help me here, someone. Councillor Peters, thank you. Okay, and welcome, Paul, as always.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And I'll hand over to our manager of our finances, and what else do you do there, Paul? All the technical stuff?
Technology.
Technology, I knew that was there somewhere. That's him.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor, and to the councillors. The recommendations in this report are really procedural in nature. In terms of the Act, there's certain requirements that we have to go through to refer Council's draft financial statements to audit, and there's a page in there which needs the signature of the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, the General Manager, the Chief Executive and the responsible accounting officer, myself. So that's really the purpose of this. I just go back a step. Later on in the agenda for today's meeting is the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee. Yep. And at the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting, we presented the draft financial statements. Yep. It's the first time I think that we've actually done that. It's not required under the Act, but in terms of good practice, it's good to do so. Last year we did it via email to the Audit Committee members. This year we actually had an Audit and Risk Committee meeting where we presented them. And the audit officers involved and auditors and so on were there too. And as a result of that, it was resolved that the Audit and Risk Committee recommends to Council that at the September Ordinary Council meeting, the draft set of financial statements be referred to Council's auditors for audit. So that's come through from the Audit and Risk Committee. Just a little bit about the statements. They are draft at the moment. They show a surplus at the moment of 10.27 million. The net, that's because of all the grant money and so on, and all the capital items which aren't included in the operating statement, obviously. When you take out all the capital contributions, it comes out to about 831,000 at the moment. They're preliminary results, as I mentioned. The water and sewer fund results, the sewer fund has made a draft surplus of about 439,000, excluding capital income, and the water fund approximately a deficit of approximately 279,000, mainly as a result of additional maintenance costs associated with the drought situation. So that's that. As I say, they're draft, and they are subject to change. A thing to note, I just wanted to raise something of note. I was looking at the Glen Innes financial statements the other day, the draft financial statements at Glen Innes, and they showed a fairly significant deficit this year that's going to their next council meeting. And the reason for that is the treatment of the disposal of their road assets, and it's a different treatment to how it's usually done. And we have a position paper that we have prepared around our treatment of the disposal of road assets, which differs from the treatment that's used in Glen Innes. But given that our auditors are the same, I just wanted to flag it because there's some chance that the auditors might put pressure on us to follow the same path.
Okay.
But we will be arguing strenuously against that, because we have a fairly solid position, we believe, on it.
And a good point, Paul.
But I just wanted to raise it, because I don't like any surprises.
No.
So that's that. In terms of the draft indicators, so on page 70 of the attachment, it lists the performance measures, and it shows a positive operating performance ratio, a positive unrestricted current ratio, a positive debt service cover ratio. We're within the boundaries for the rates and annual charges percentage outstanding ratio, and our cash expense cover is still quite high. The one ratio or indicator that has decreased significantly is our own source operating revenue ratio, down to 38.49%, and that's purely because of all the extra grants that we've received.
Yep.
So I just make you aware of that. But apart from that, it's there, as I say, it's draft, and seek your approval to refer it to audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Is there any questions to Paul to do with the report, councillors? Councillor Rogan, and I'll go to you, Councillor Sawyer. Thank you.
Thanks through you, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure whether it's what I'm actually looking at. Well, I sort of am. But on that note section, note number 2, so for Paul on page 15.
Yep. To do with the councillor, I apologise. To do with the attachment number 4.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what page again? I apologise, councillor.
Page 15.
Yep.
There's a section of notes that started, I think, the page before that, Mr Mayor, but this is note 2A.
Yes.
And in the left-hand column, where it talks about the functions or activities, when it gets down to so I'm looking at the plant, fleet and equipment line. If you go across there, we end up with income of 71,000, 440,000 expenses, but that's shown in brackets. So I just wanted an explanation on that, because added together we end up with an operating result of 511, which seems positive. I'm just wondering, that line doesn't seem consistent to me with all the other lines, and I just wondered whether there's a reason for that, that's all.
That's a very good pick-up, thank you for that. And that's because the way our plant is accounted for, the income from the plant hire goes against that expenditure account. It doesn't go to its income account as such. It's offset against the expenditure account, and it's showing that we've received more income from the grant from plant hire than the expenditure, and it's just offset against that account. So it's it's basically, yeah, it's
So it's not an error, Paul, it's just...
No, it's not an error. It's just the way that we account for the plant hire.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Sawyer, you've indicated.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you to Paul. Halfway down page 57 in the hard copy under water and sewer fund results. It's always dangerous to assume, so I'm going to ask, am I safe to assume that the figures there are as a result of the measures we've been taking to try and make those two funds self-sustaining?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I would suggest yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good question and a good answer. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions to Paul to do with the report, councillors? No? The officer's recommendations there, councillors, all in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors, move on to page 60, correct me if I'm wrong, item GOV 60/19, finance and accounts, period end the 31st of August 2019. Can I move in a second to here, please? Councillor Michael Petrie, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Brodman, thank you. And once again, I hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is the usual monthly finance report. It shows a cash position of 4.384 million as at the 31st of August, with 313,000 in the trust fund, and investments totalling 14.358 million as at the 31st of August. For the month of August, there was one concession granted under Council's considered water leakage concession policy to the value of $461.91.
Questions to Paul to do with this report? No? Officer's recommendations there, councillors, all in favour? Against? Carried? Page 63, councillors. GOV 61/19, capital expenditure report as of the 31st of August. Moving to seconder here, please. Councillor Verry, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Forbes, and I thank you. And once again, I'll hand over to Paul.
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. The capital expenditure report to the 31st of August. There for your information, once again fairly early on in the year still, and I don't believe there's any significant variance identified at this stage, but if there's any questions, happy to take them.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Rogan, yes?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, through you. Sorry, Paul. On the, so this year, 1920, the budget for the additional war water supply is shown as zero. Is that because we haven't got grant funding for it yet, or what's the story there? Thanks.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll just get to the right section.
Where? Is it this one?
It's on the back of the first page 2.
Councillor, just for some clarity for councillors, which attachment?
The capital expenditure, so it's 5.
Attachment 5, thank you.
And it's page 2, so the back of the first sheet.
Yep, yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, can I just clarify, is that under the...
Actually, it's wrong, it's page 4.
You're close. So which item were you referring to, councillor?
Under water supply.
Yep.
So that's, for capital expenditure, if you go down there.
Yeah.
About 3 or 4, 3 and 4 up from the bottom, it talks about additional water supply.
Okay.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes. So nothing was budgeted for that as part of the original budget. Obviously, this is new expenditure, and it will be dealt with as part of the first quarterly budget review. So.
Yep, do you want to add some there, Mr CE?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the emergency water project, bearing in mind that this would have been printed a little while ago, it's actually probably closer to about 440,000 expended now. And David Wolferton, our project manager on the job, myself, and another couple of people are currently reconciling the expenditure to send DIW our second payment request. It's unlike the grant for the water filtration plant, which is a deed, because it's an emergency funding, and basically is you keep spending until you find water. There was an indicative budget of 3.2 million for it, and an indicative grant of 372,000 from the Minister for Water. We failed in the first 6 bores. We're up to bores 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 at the moment. We're probably about $60,000 or $80,000 over our initial thoughts. I won't say over budget because it was just a guess. We had no idea where the water was or wasn't going to be. So although it wasn't budgeted for, there has been written agreement between Council and DI Water and the Minister's office. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, CE. Yeah, I was just wondering whether we're going to end up having to borrow money, whether those grants are going to offset all this or not, percentage-wise. Thanks.
Fair question. Other questions? Any other questions or to Paul to do with this report? Councillor, sorry, you've indicated? No, sorry, Councillor Bromwich.
Yep, thanks, Paul. Just on waste management on that same page, just up a bit higher, the Green Waste Hungry Bin school trial, is that all schools or just the Tenterfield High School? And the tip shops just above that, I was just wondering how the tip shops were actually progressing.
Through you, Mr Mayor, in terms of the Green Hungry Waste Bin school trial, I'll take that on notice and come back to you. I'm not sure whether that... They have started. I'm not sure whether it's, which schools are right, whether it's... Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
And the other one was around the shop. The Drake Liston and Tenterfield tip shop with, there's no expenditure against that yet, so I presume it hasn't started yet, but,
I'm not spending any money, but I'm assuming that you're not
yeah, that's right.
relative shows.
No.
Not sure. Righto. Okay. No more questions to the report, councillors? The officer's recommendation there, all in favour of the recommendation? Against? Carried. Councillors, move on to page 65. It's item GOV 62/19, council submission, review of reporting and compliance burdens of local government. Can I have a move in a second to deal with this one, please? Councillor Sawyer, thank you. Second, please. Councillor Bromman, thank you. And once again, I'll hand over to Manager of Finance and Technology, Paul.
Thanks again, Mr Mayor, and through you. This is the second of some reviews that have been done by IPART, the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal. You might recall last meeting we discussed the rating review, and this one is to do with compliance burdens on local government, or in brackets regulatory burdens. So it's looking at burdens placed on local government by the state government and ways of reducing those burdens. We have until the 25th of October to provide feedback on this final report from IPART. A little bit of the history. So the Premier asked IPART to conduct a review of unnecessary or excessive burdens placed on local government by the New South Wales Government in the form of planning, reporting and compliance obligations, and to make recommendations for how these could be reduced. Some of them, in fact all of these are fairly straightforward things in terms of compared to the rates review, which is a bit more detailed and complicated, but some of these things include streamlined acquittal processes for grants, data sharing, some standard templates, single systems for uploading statements to the ABS and so on, planning portal, things like that. So all fairly straightforward things. Probably, as I mentioned in the report, probably the most contentious issue is recommendation 32, particularly in terms of staff, because recommendation 32 talks about temporary employment and its definition. So it's talking about extending the maximum periods of temporary employment from 12 months to 4 years within any continuous period of 5 years, similar to Rule 10 of the Government Sector Employment Rules 2014. So you will see in the documents you have, I had said unsure at this time as to what our feedback would be, because we referred it to the Staff Workforce Consultative Committee for feedback. I did make a mention in here that management does like the flexibility that this would bring. So yes, we did have a staff consultative committee meeting on Monday, and probably not surprisingly, the outcome of that was that in regards to recommendation 32 of the IPART, the committee has a dissenting view and believe there should be no increase to the maximum period of temporary employment of 12 months or 24 months if the holder of the position is on parental leave. So that was the view of the staff at that staff consultative committee meeting, and the union who were also present, the USU. So that was their perspective, and really it's up to council to decide on what view to take on this, and Terry, our CEO, may have some views on this as well. So,
thank you, Paul. I'll hand over to our CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Paul. Barry Frew, our Manager, Human Resources and Workforce Development, who's currently on leave in northeast Fiji, wrote to us to say this. Hi Terry, Paul. Basically a state government legislative, this is in relation to 32. Basically a state government legislative matter. The government has the opportunity to vary this very inflexible clause, which is often only honoured in the breach. The situation should be in line with the state government practice, be straightforward and without caveats or exceptions. I support the change and would recommend that council fall in line with IPART proposals in conformity with state government thoughts and practices in this case for a number of reasons. Regards, Barry.
Yes, so through you, Mr Mayor, that's the view of our HR manager. You've also had the view of the staff from the Staff Consultative Committee meeting, so it's really over to council.
Questions to Paul to do with the report and the presentation? Councillor Bellman, and then I'll go to Councillor Reagan. You've indicated, Councillor Reagan? Yep.
Thanks. So, Paul, are the staff, I was concerned about the impact on staff retention if it was held out to 5 years, a temporary arrangement. We could be losing people who might get a full-time job elsewhere, but I could see the convenience of if it was extended, to 18 months or 2 years, having that temporary thing. That's more common. The other one was on page 30, item 30. This is regarding placing as many approval requirements as possible in specialist legislation and talking about removing duplication. Is this to prevent or reduce dual consent requirements? In that one there, and the...
I apologise, Councillor, dual what?
Dual consent, where you need a state government approval as well as a council approval.
Okay, thank you.
And the other one was in 18. Your comment is there that reference 149 certificates agreed to the proposal, but you said planning portal needs to be more accurate than it currently is to ensure accurate certificates are issued. What's happening there with inaccurate certificates? What's the issue?
Do you want to deal with 30 first? And then we'll go to 18.
Oh, well, no, you're up.
Ladies first.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, to me, the way that read was that it was about removing some duplication. So that was how it read to me. But probably, as Kylie may know more about it than me, being a planning issue though. So.
Please, Kylie.
No, I think the general idea, and we've actually seen it, remembering that these original reports are reasonably old, we're seeing planning transition into the set provisions. So there's been a lot of changes there with having planning provisions that are across the state. So that's largely what I believe that one's talking about.
Okay. Righto. So that was 30. Do you want to deal with 18? Sorry, Paul.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So that was to do with, so this comment was from our Manager of Planning.
Yes.
That the planning portal needs to be more accurate than it currently is to ensure accurate certificates are issued. I don't really have any more detail other than what Tomo's written in there.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Any more questions to do with the report, councillors? No? The officer's recommendations there. All in favour? I'm sorry, Paul. I apologise.
So we still need to resolve recommendation 32.
Right.
As to what we got.
I apologise.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the letter the CEO read out from our HR manager indicated for varying reasons, but he didn't give the reasons.
Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, let's pick Woodenbong Road upgrade, for example. It's a fixed cost, fixed term project of 3 years of $24 million, $12 million supplied by the state and $12 million supplied by the federal government.
Yep.
Currently, we've got a contract engineer on it, Mr Frank Boyce, who's doing a terrific job, and the stage 2 is about to be open shortly. Mr Boyce is a contractor. Should council at the time had chosen to put a permanent staff member on, it would have been for the fixed term of 3 years, which is classified under this as a temporary staff member, because when the money runs out in 3 years and there's only one Woodenbong Road to reconstruct, there's no other Woodenbong Road to do. So in effect, Mr Boyce his job has been to supervise the design and construction of the Woodinbong Road, and that's it. We are actually using Mr Boyce for other things as well. He's proved very handy with timber bridges, just quietly. But that's an example of where, if council had chosen to use a temporary employee, the employment contract would have been for 3 years. At the moment, it was 2 years, but well, a lot of councils were signing contracts for 2 years, but probably about 18 months ago or 2 years ago that was tested, and I think at the moment it's only 12 months. So what councils do, and Tenterfield is one of them, to get around that, is hire a contractor to do the work for 3 years, in this case Mr Boyce, to build Woodinbong Road. His services may or may not be needed in the future, but at the time of procuring his services there was only one job to do, and when it's over, it's over. So that's an example of a longer than 12 months term of temporary employment.
Thanks, Mr CE. Again, Mr Mayor, I think I detect what the staff problem with that is, because they fear that there'll be a whole rash of council employment under that process, and they're scared for their future.
Yep.
But the explanation from the CEO is more specialised employment rather than general employment. So as a former HR professional, I don't have a problem with letting it continue because it suits our flexibility. And it doesn't provide the alarms that the staff are reading into that recommendation.
Yeah, of course you can.
Through Mr Mayor, I'd like to make another comment. Council spends a lot of time coaching and developing staff, and staff spend a lot of time coaching and developing themselves as they learn as they go along. It's not in council's interest to have a whole cadre of staff on short-term or even medium-term contracts, because number one, it's very expensive to keep rehiring people, but number two, you're trying to grow your own and have them grow in their jobs and move up into the next job if it's available. So I concur with what Councillor Sawyer has said. I do understand the staff's point of view, because the amount of part-time or temporary employment right across the whole country has gone up dramatically in the last 10 or 15 years. In this instance, though, this is not the case.
Councillor Vera, you had a question to do with the report? You're just referring to item to this 32?
No, I'm back to 7.
Right. Well, no, with respect, Councillor, I needed to ask that. We just need to... Paul, so we're working with our Manager of Finance and Technology here. So, Paul, you're wanting some clarity on what Council feels on 32. So we'll just tidy that up.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that would be good, whether you support the recommendation or don't support it, basically.
Okay. Councillor, this is to do with 32?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So close to my age.
Councillor Bromwell.
Yeah. Paul, my reading of this was that the current maximum period is 12 months, temporary employment, isn't it?
That's right, through you, Mr Mayor. So currently the situation is 12 months unless it's for parental leave, where it's up to 2 years in that case.
Yeah. So we've already got, for instance, Mr Boyce on a contract for 3 years, or just for the term of the whatever. He's not on a 12-month contract. So is it the case that someone under contract is not deemed to be, under the current definitions, a temporary employee?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the contract is totally different to a temporary employee.
Right,
It's
so
not related.
Okay, so coming back to my original thing then, if we employ, say, someone in accounting or HR or at the front desk, admin, if we want to employ someone at the moment on temporary, we're limited to a 12-month. And so, correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Right, so contract staff for a specific project that goes well beyond is irrelevant to this. So, I mean, my concern is, for staff, is the potential where a lot of staff may be put on temporary for up to 4 years, in which case we may then lose good staff because they'll go, well, we don't want to be a temporary employee, we want to have a permanent job with holidays, sick pays, etc. And you then have the loss, the ability to retain, you've reduced retention of staff.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's clearly the concern of the union and the staff.
Yep.
So that's their concern, obviously. As the CEO has mentioned, it's not something that we would really want to see happen on a widespread basis here at council. But yeah, so that's.
Did you want some comment, Mr.
Yeah, as I said before, for jobs that have got any semblance of continuity, it's actually not in council's interest to put someone on a temporary or a short term, because you just create the whole resignation, confusion, staff having to overlap in the jobs, then recruitment, someone relearning stuff again. Whereas someone like Mr Boyce, who's a contractor, not on contract, and there's a difference with that. He's a contractor that has been hired by council, and his remuneration is booked out against the Woodinbong Road construction job. Yep. In agreement with the RMS.
RMS, that's right, because they manage it.
So I do understand what the staff's saying. I can't comment for future direction of future councils, but it's my personal opinion. I think they're jumping at shadows.
Yep. Councillor, to do with this, what, 32? Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And I'd take on board all the comments that CE's made and Paul's made. Originally, I was going to ask the question that Councillor Sawyer has already, I think, part answered, and that's about what the staff's concerns were. Why did them and the union take that position?
Yep.
And I do get it. It's about uncertainty, about their future, about employment. And I also understand what Paul is saying, that, and the CE, that's not in council's interests, but there's no guarantee that a council in the future is going to have the same outlook as this one. And so I'd support it staying at 12 months for that reason. Thank you.
To do, okay, to do. Oh, we'll come back to you for 7, with respect, council. We just need to stay focused here.
With 32, say you go for 4 years,
Yep.
and you've got a job like the Irvinville Woodinbong Road or Woodinbong
Yep.
Road,
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
wouldn't the job be advertised as a temporary staff for, say, 3 years to work on that job?
Through Mr Mayor, you can't actually have a temporary employment for more than 12 months now, which has forced council to go into a contractual position, because we know that the funding for that job runs out in 3 years.
Yeah.
Actually, now it's only about a year and a half.
I realise that, but I'm saying, if this change went through, wouldn't you advertise the job as a 3-year job or something like that? If the change went through as 4 years?
Through Mr Mayor, you could, and as I said, I can see staff's point of view. I actually think there's an alternative point of view that actually offers more continuity for those people such as Frank, who at the moment basically gets, his employment is on a due and charge basis through LOGO, which is the local government procurement approved contractor that supplies contract staff to local government. So I see with someone as such as Frank, who knew when he took up his commission that the job would be for 3 years, it actually would offer him in this instance more surety of work, because at the moment, because it's limited to only 12 months, he can only be employed on a week-to-week basis. Although he does know that when he started that the $24 million was over 3 years.
Yep. To do with 32, councillor?
Absolutely. Just coming back now that Paul has clarified it, being the 12 months, I mean, I could understand if they were recommending it could go out to 2 years. But, I mean, I actually saw a guy, he killed himself because he could not get the permanent job, and he therefore couldn't get a house loan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the impact on people for extended periods of temporary employment, of casual employment, even though it was full-time, it went on for years and years and years. So if there's no option to go to, if it's 12 to 4, and you can't take 18 months or 2, then I'll stick with 12, thanks.
Through you, Mr Mayor, when looking at the feedback that was provided originally to when this draft report came out, yes, okay, so there are a couple of schools of thought. One was, as we talked about, that we need flexibility, and so 4 years. Another was that 4 years was too long, as you mentioned, Councillor, and maybe 2 years was more appropriate. The major objections around it, or the major areas where flexibility was needed, was around, as we mentioned, hiring employees for projects of a fixed term greater than 1 year, hiring of employees to cover a staff member on extended workers' compensation leave, long service leave, or secondment to a different position. So they're the main type of examples where some greater flexibility was required. So I can understand both sides of the argument too.
Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to follow up from all the discussion, but in particular the CEOs, if this goes through at 12 months, it shuts a lot of flexibility doors for council. And the out that the CEOs brought up, that we could then go and hire Frank through Logo, automatically everybody needs to be aware that the contract cost we're currently paying to him direct is going to be added to by the commission that Logo charge us to hire that employee. So straight away you've blown it out of the water.
Yeah.
I understand the concern about having too long on temporary employment, but let's come back to the definition that Paul just read out. Specific purpose projects. If we word that into our policy, that we will have a maximum period of 3 years, or whatever wording we're looking for, on specific special purpose projects, it keeps the alarm from the employees out of the equation and continues to give us the flexibility we need to run our specific special projects.
Good point, Councillor.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, I'll just make clear, obviously this is going to be a state government decision, and we're one of 126 councils having feedback into this. The intention is to take this out of the legislation and move it to the award, so it'll be enshrined in the award, whatever's decided by the state government. So just to make that clear as well.
Obviously.
And it's currently 12 months.
That's what it's saying there. So it is 32 is extend the minimum period of temporary employment from 12 months to 4 years within any conditional period of 5 years, similar to Rule 10 of the government sector employment rules, 214. So Paul, what and as the CEO and yourself have said, this is to go back in the submission to the government, and then they make the decision. But the view of this council, okay. So as today, are we doing it as to support the recommendation, to change the recommendation, or what are we after here, an amendment, or, hey? And that's what we're thinking, Mr. C, you're going to advise there that we need to do an amendment to the recommendation, or add one on there.
Through my antennae says that the room's divided on it, so I think we're going to need a vote.
Okay. So to do with 32, with the recommendation the council has been asked to comment on, can I have a mover to do, we'll do an amendment there and vote on it? Whether we're supportive, so we all need to be clear of this and go down to the bottom, that this has been referred to the staff workforce consultative committee, which is us. This is the committee here in Tenterfield. Feedback from staff management likes the flexibility this would bring, so they're liking what we're reading there, and this will be updated when presented to council. Okay? I just want us all clear what we're actually doing here. So the amendment is 32, yes?
So through you, Mr Mayor, in terms of the officer's recommendation, item 3 there,
Advise any
It
changes?
says, yes, that council advise of any changes required to the draft response, and we'll incorporate that into the draft response that we sent.
Okay. So we'll do it as a motion, whether we're supportive of 32, as it reads.
And through Mr Mayor, subject to what councillor Veery says about 7, it may be more than 1.
Okay, just all is all clear on this. So we're clear on what we're going to do here? Okay. Well, now I'm going to ask for someone to move and second the motion. Okay, councillor... 32. Yes, okay. Thank you, councillor Boardman. Yeah. So, and can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bob Rogan. Okay, do you want to speak to that, councillor Boardman?
No, I think it's better if we send something down with, in this particular case, with a yes or no.
Yep.
Yes, I mean, obviously the room is divided.
Yep.
We've got the comments from management, comments
Yep.
from staff.
Yep.
And our own feelings on the matter. And it is what it is.
Thank you. Councillor Bob being the second, do you want to speak?
Mr Mayor, I think councillor Bronwyn has put that quite eloquently.
Okay.
Thank you, I support.
Thank you. Okay, councillor, any more comment, questions to do with what we're doing? Okay. Yes, councillor Murray, by all means,
If
so
I
we're all
may.
clear. Yes,
Yeah,
of course you
through
may.
Mr Mayor. What happens then when all these, we'll call them submissions for the moment.
Yep.
If they go back into the state government,
Yep.
is it majority rules? Is that applicable to each and every council?
Very good question. I'll see you. Comment?
decide?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the report's probably already been written.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
But with the CEs making that comment, I do commend them because it is important that we have a good workforce and they're happy in their job, and that we are aware of their concerns to do longevity into the job. So that's what it's all about, and I do commend everyone. I don't care how long we take, because we without our staff are our biggest asset. And as that award to the left of me indicates. Okay, so the motion says been moved by councillor Bronwyn Petrie, second by councillor Bob Brogan, to extend the maximum periods of temporary employment from 12 months to 4 years with an continuous period of 5 years, similar to Rule 10 of the Government Sector Employment Rules 2014. All in favour? Put your hands up so I can do a count, please.
That we have the motion.
Yes.
No, this is just the
No.
recommendation, 32.
Yeah,
So hang on, so we're going all in favour whether we want to extend it to 4 years? Yes.
that's what it reads. Okay, so we're all aware of that? Okay. Question or vote, council? Okay, so please raise your hand so I count. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Against? 2. Motion's up. So support. Apologise, Paul, we took a long time to get there, but it was a good discussion. Councillor Vernon, I'll go back to you. You've indicated something to do with number 7.
It was about grants.
There it says, provide a streamlined equitable grant process.
Can you put your,
Microphone, please, councillor. Thanks, Noel. Order, please.
Provide a streamlined acquittal process for grants less than $20,000 in total. Example of streamlining include et cetera, I think we need to go a lot more than $20,000. I think they should put up there to $200,000 because the cost of acquittal of some of these grants, I think there's one we had to send, I think it was our engineer, Stephen Bell, I think he had to go to a 3-day course or something just to acquit a bloody grant.
Oh, okay.
This is bureaucracy gone mad, in my opinion.
The development is bad, but you just got to confirm it.
Oh, now I'm...
Through you,
Apologise, councillor.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Paul.
Look, I actually think that's a good point you raised because, for example, the $1 million that we received for the drought funding, we had to do an audit of that, and that was over $2,000 for that audit. You know, and it strikes me as doubling up on things when we have a full-blown financial audit, and then we have to do all these individual acquittals, get them audited as well. It seems to be an industry.
Mr. CEO.
Mr Mayor, yeah, I agree with councillor Veery. The Local Government Act in relation to procurement's just been changed. for that very reason, because of the cost of procuring things for tenders was at 150,000 for 33 years.
That's right.
And yet, which was designed to reduce administrative costs to councils, and yet the grant system, and it's not only acquitting the grants, the amount of work that's the staff have put into the Stronger Country Communities Fund Mark III, it is unbelievable what the government has asked for. So, yeah, I'd agree that they're missing a zero on the end of this.
Probably 2 zeros, to be honest with you.
Councillor Bob Rogan,
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a question to...
to do with what we're talking about, councillor?
Yeah. Council's obviously asked to provide a support or not support.
Yep.
And if we want to change that, would we still showing our support, but a note to say that we recommend that amount be increased?
Yep.
Or would it be
Yes.
an amendment?
I think that's what we're leading to, councillor.
So we don't have to vote on this at all? We just recommend that they put a note on the bottom of it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just happy to make a note to that effect, that we think it should be increased.
Yep. You happy with that, councillor? Yep. All good. No, all good. Okay, councillors, we're doing all that. All in favour with the officer to move the officer's recommendation. All in favour? Against, carried. Thank you. We got there. Thank you, Paul. Okay, councillors, we move on to our reports from delegates and...
Your addendum.
addendum. Apologise, Noel. The addendum item, councillors, which had been moved to be dealt with in our, to do with our agenda, it's item GOV 64/19, substaining the regions 2019 Sydney to the 1st and 2nd of October. Can I move in a second to deal with this item, please? Everyone get the addendum? Okay. Yep. Councillor Very, you've moved. Seconder, please. Councillor Tom Peters, thank you. The agenda and that in there, councillor, I thought it would be a good opportunity to be down there. They're having the second day's totally on drought. We have been in the room and in the tent with a lot of this work. The JO's obviously is of importance the first day, but I was very interested in being involved in the conversation to do with the local government, New South Wales, and what they're trying to do here. So that was my keenness to be involved. So I'm happy to take any questions. The officer's recommendations there. All in favour? Against, carried. Thank you. Now we move on to, apologise, Noel, to reports from delegates and committees. Item RC 18/19, reports committees, delegates, Sandry Parks Memorial School of Arts Joint Committee. Being the chair of that, I'm happy to move that along those ways. Councillor Sawyer, being involved, you have to second? Thank you. Any questions, comments to do with that, councillors? No? All happy to receive a note? Against, carried. Thank you. 73 in your hard copy, councillors. Item RC 1919, reports of committees, audit and risk. Councillor Forbes being the delegate there, happy to move that way? Thank you. Seconders, please. Councillor Michael Petrie, thank you. Any comment, questions, councillors? Councillor Forbes?
Yeah, just a quick comment, Mr Mayor. I'd refer you to page 76, the second item on page 76 there, the recognition of Wes Osmond for his nomination to the election position of Chair of the Northern Inland Risk Management Group.
Yep.
Wasn't aware that such a group existed, but yeah, so he has been elevated to that position, recognised by his peers, so it was a feather in his cap there. So, and the other point is on page 77, general business, new risk management internal audit framework. As Kylie's there, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we went, Kylie and Eric and I, we went to a workshop over at Inverell a few months ago where that was presented to us, as I understand, wasn't it? And from what I gather, we were pretty well long way down the track of implementing that framework, weren't we? We're pretty well advanced, weren't we?
to support Councillor Forbes's comments that Tenterfield Shire Council, in comparison to other local governments within New South Wales, is fairly advanced within their risk management and internal audit framework. However, the proposal that has been put out by the Office of Local Government at this point in time does differ a little bit from our approach, and does certainly present an additional cost to council over and above what we're currently looking at. So the Audit and Risk Committee are going to have a discussion about that as well for some words at their next meeting. So basically the framework now is a lot more prescriptive, whereby the current framework that we're using in terms of numbers of members on the Audit and Risk Committee, their makeup, as well as their qualifications, probably wouldn't meet the new standards that have been set. We need to go up another level if that was the case, if that was adopted as it is. And then the question comes back, which I'm sure the Chief Executive will like to elaborate on, is whether or not that cost will translate into a tangible benefit either for council or for the industry as a whole.
So what you're saying, Kylie, is that to be on that committee you need to have some sort of qualifications in accountancy or something like that?
There are prescriptive qualifications. We also, according to the model proposed, need to pay a fee that's higher than what we're currently paying as prescribed by the state government. So it's very prescriptive, and it will be more expensive. So it's not a long read. So I encourage all of you to have a look at that.
Wow. That concerns me, actually. But anyway, okay. Did you want to comment? Yep. Mr. C.E.?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I suspect that the driving force behind this was Botany Council's, their CFO, Coleman, I think his name was, Gary Goodman, and the over 4% of money that he was able to milk out of Botany Council to the tune of about $16 million over 5 years. And subsequently, now the other 125 councils in New South Wales are going to pay twice as much as they've been paying for audit services for everyone a day to mitigate that risk. I can't comment on other councils, but I comment on, I confer with the Chief Corporate Officer that we're probably 3/4 the way down here without having incurred the extra cost. Probably to sum it up, it's a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. And unfortunately, we're going to be forced to use the sledgehammer, I think.
Thank you, Mr. C. Any questions to do with the report, councillors? Councillor Bronwyn, yes?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just was wondering, Don, the first item there to be provided at the next meeting, it says a matrix of recommendations from individual audits. After that meeting, do we receive a copy of what these recommendations may be? On page 75. Oh, just...
They'd have to refer that to you, Kyle. You do. Yes. Have we got those?
That's a pretty good handball, Councillor Forbes. Right across. Sorry.
The other members of council are welcome, and this is the understanding that we developed at that risk management forum that we went to as well in Inverell. The risk management minutes are public and go to council, and any councillor is welcome to attend the forums as a guest, but usually we don't publicise the minutes. So no, in terms of that, the Audit and Risk Committee would look and review those actions and give council the undertaking that those actions have been complied with. If, once again, there is a specific issue that council wishes to raise or wishes to know more about or has concerns, as always, more than happy to have the conversation about that and provide a report to council on those activities.
So I just thought if there's recommendations that have come out of a whole heap of different audits, wouldn't it be helpful to all councillors to know what these sort of recommendations are for future audits that they may be involved in?
And I guess that's what we're saying is the job of the Audit and Risk Committee, and as I said, based on that committee at this point in time, is that they manage that for council. I mean, the question is, if that was the type of path we were going on, why wouldn't we extend the membership of the Audit and Risk Committee to have more people or interested people on the Audit and Risk Committee?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't find that satisfactory. I just think if it's not secret squirrel, surely. I mean, if these are general recommendations on in relation to audit, to any audit, as in general terms, not specific audits, but these are recommendations that have come forward from a series of audits that have taken place. Isn't that something that helps all councillors in the progression of our job as a councillor?
Usually, and same thing. I don't wish to engage in a standoff on this. As I said, if council wants specific access, we can look at that. The issue is that a lot of these are operational, so it's the same as when we have a financial audit. We go through things like, individual journals, individual accounts, and that's what we charge the auditor with. We employ an internal auditor to go through systems and processes, and the Audit and Risk Committee then get a list of in their business papers, which their business papers are confidential, and they get a list of items, and their job is to make sure that the management responses are adequate and being implemented in accordance with those audits, and to give that undertaking to the council through their minutes.
But all just to before we approve the report, everything comes back to council, and I'm trying to, the way I understand this, councillor, like in our financial statements to every department, like, I mean, it's all been audited to be there. That sounds a bit grey, what I'm saying, but I know what you're saying, but I mean, and I understand the reply from Kylie to do with the Audit and Risk Committee. But it's no smoke and mirrors. I mean, nothing's held in, I mean, you're quite entitled to get copies of anything, if you mean from a personal basis. But if, I haven't finished, but if council were to be provided for more information for us to make a decision or clarity on something, I mean, they're quite entitled to ask for these documentations also, in particular areas. But mainly I work on as a positive and how good how far we are down the track with the Audit and Risk Committee, because in the early days there wasn't too much of that going on, and it's gone a quantum leap. So it has.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know, and I'll take on board your comment. Okay. Is there any other comments to do or questions to do with the Audit and Risk Committee? No? The report's there. Councillors all happy to receive a note? Yep. You've apologised, councillor. You'll get a question.
Yeah, just...
I do apologise.
Just clarification.
Yeah.
I understand, I think, from where Bronwyn's coming from. Just clarify for me, on the Audit and Risk Committee, our representatives are yourself and the CEO and Don.
Yes.
The other executive people, staff, are there to assist with the preparation of documents and feedback from the documents, and we've employed two independent individuals to give us an outside perspective on the way we meet the rules and regulations.
Yep.
My opinion is that your fears are unfounded, because if we have a cast of thousands sitting on this committee, we'll get nowhere and get bogged down. I think we're ably represented by three individuals. They don't have to be those same three individuals, but I think those three individuals with the two external people get the job done.
Yeah, and they do. And bring, especially with the two referring to, councillor, that bring a heap of experience there.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, it's three externals.
Yep, I apologise, councillor Forbes. Yep.
Sorry, just to clarify.
Well,
I have every faith in people on the committee, don't get me wrong. I'm just wondering if there's a matrix of recommendations. We've got 3 councillors on there, 7, 9. I've just thought if it's recommendations that could be of interest to other councillors who, and I don't expect a cast of thousands to go on every committee, let alone the Risk and Audit one. But some of the information, such as a recommendation matrix, could be of interest to the other councillors who aren't on that committee. So.
Okay.
And I suppose this goes back, and I know it's always a contentious issue, the recommendations of those audits need to be implemented by the management team, and where those implementation of those recommendations require help from council to meet that, such as an additional budget, or if there's a problem, same thing, we would report up a risk as well through our operational plan. So we're not ignoring that, but we're in the nitty-gritty about, which system is best, and I guess they become more so operational issues than strategic ones for council consideration.
Yep.
And that's why I'm saying I'm more than happy to have commentary or questions, same thing if either of the councillors on that committee or the CEO have got an issue, more than happy to have the discussion, but it does bog the process down, and that's one where it starts to really blur that operational line if we're feeding all of that that information up, I guess, to have the expertise of council involved in that.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Sawyer, I apologise, I missed with your question before. Now I'll put the recommendation to receive and note. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillor, move on to our last item, page 78. It's to do with our council resolution register. It's item RES 8/19 for September. Can I move in a second to you, please? Come on. Councillor Rogan, thank you. Second by Councillor Murray, and I thank you. And I hand over to our CE.
Through you, Mr Mayor, happy to take questions by exception.
Any questions to do with the council resolution register? Councillor Bronwyn?
Just in relation to the business awards, that have been put off till November this year.
Yep.
Just wondering where they're at. I mean, the comment says it's a format to working with the business chamber is currently being investigated. We're only 2 months away.
Good put.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I have to take that on notice. The manager is due to recommence work next week, so I'll be able to take that up with Mr Bolton.
All good. Any other questions, councillors? No? The officer's recommendations there, all happy to receive a note? Against? Carried. Thank you. That's the end of our, there's no notice of motions, no confidential business. That's the end of our meeting. Councillor, before I close our meeting, I do thank you all very much for the outstanding job that everyone's done over the last few weeks. This council has been noted for the effort that's been done to, with the support of the RFS team. We're supplying water trucks and graders and everything, and I attended a meeting on Sunday and that was noted. So all we're very proud of our staff that we've got and the extra time that they put in. I thank you all very much for your attendance. Lunch will be here in the chambers, and I'll close the meeting, and the meeting is ended in peace and harmony. And I thank you all very much.
Sure, Gary. Okay, first of all, emergency response. What do they, if an emergency happens in
The Urbanville Emergency Management Centre is actually in Urbanville because all the roads can be cut off from in it. And basically, if it's declared, if it's a fire, it's a section 44, it won't be running differently than what the fires here were.
It'd be run from Glen or...
It'd be run from Glen, but there'd probably be a, because it could be cut off, there'd probably be a centre in Urbanville as well to coordinate the locals. But that's actually any local emergency management centre run from Urbanville. We actually intended having an exercise about now actually in relation to fires at Urbanville, but the real fire took over. And we might end up with a fire at Urbanville this year too.
Well, there's one close there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's supposed to be the same.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised we haven't had a big fire east of you actually down River Tree and down that way.
Oh, I've been expecting it. That one from Ballindine was going straight over my place and then we need a bit of...
Yeah, a bit more wind, and if it gets down to that channel, that gorge country down there, they'll never get it out.
No, we've had it there before.
And if it gets into the Demon Fault, they'll never get it out either. They might as well just start burning off on the east side, hoping that they'll stop it coming over the hill. But, yeah.
And the other one, Terry, is there's a bloke taking leave to go to High Court on a constitutional challenge to all these veg laws and this bullshit. How could we get a letter of support?
Well, like some of Councillor Small's commentary, don't be afraid that they don't go through it.
I've got to get there you go.
We'll get the detail and I'll put some dot points in for you to put a motion up the council.
And we can put it up to take the JR.
Yeah, and include that in the motion as well. Because it's not only our council that's suffering. Actually, one of the Green councillors, the mayor of Belton, actually admitted that we buggered all the management of state forests and national parks up. Because otherwise we wouldn't be having all these hot fires.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll get some details of my ringing him up and some talking yesterday. Apparently he's got leave to go to High Court for challenge. We should prove it.
I know that the New South Wales farmers are going to, there's someone out in western New South Wales that is going to take the New South Wales government to court over vegetation laws and arbitrary excluding areas on his farm because it actually gets onto the land rights issue and the tendency of purchasing land. They're very interesting. Very interesting.
Something else was stopped up completely.
Yep. Oh, well,
One with everything else.
yeah, we stuff up quite a few things, Gary.
Oh, when you're a 16-year-old girl telling the world what to do, what do you expect?
That's a con. She's been put up with that. That's very well orchestrated.
Absolutely. But I mean, when you get...
Genius, though.
Yeah.
But a lot of dumb people are falling for it.
Yeah. But when you get adults listening to a 16-year-old girl from the world, I mean, it's different from coming to council or whatever.
She's only been out of puberty 3 years. You know?
World of experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We might kick off the tour. Yeah, back building. Different office. That's all right. We'll go on to that way for those.
So we're just getting the meeting.
So, yeah, I recommend you get on that committee if a vacancy comes up. It's good to be on.
But I mean, it's just, I was just interested in this.
Oh, I agree. And the other thing that I think came out of this workshop, because this bloke presented a workshop, I think, as a councillor, you know, constantly, he said, you're entitled to access to any document with the council. And any, that's right, and that's right, because as a councillor, that's right, have access to it.
So this gentleman assumed that.
Oh, well, that's what we got from, no. And these two kids
If the consensus didn't agree with what they had
So ready.
ordained.
All right, you're on, you guys don't be I'm coming. Hiding there, I'm trying to get over. All right.
The same week that you got the report to return to the burdens of local government, we've got another report which increased the burdens on the Auckland risk point twice. So I wrote something in our shop, I was 80.
I did.
I couldn't believe the same week, okay, so you're going to reduce the burdens, and by the way, you're going to pay twice as much for your orders, thinking you're going to need all this extra.
All right. Gotta walk.
You can't have a tour. No, I shouldn't be looking at it.
to the auditors and say they can start.
That was quick.
Thank you very much.
I think so. He gave them a very direct focus. You need to go away. You need to prove your case. That's the staff. So isn't that off? Tony's still saying, we only need 2 by 2. Alan said to him. So we can't edit this, can we? In front of everybody. Because I thought it was blue. That was their private conversation. It was blue.